My name is Hannah Mercer. I am 34 years old. The moment my mother saw me standing at my younger brother's wedding, she quietly whispered 5 words that almost made me turn around. You should not be here. 10 minutes later, the retired federal judge seated beside the bride stood up before the first toast, looked directly at me, and said he had been waiting 13 years to meet me again. The ballroom fell silent. My brother froze with his champagne glass still in his hand. My mother's smile disappeared so quickly that it looked painful. Nobody understood why one of the most respected judges in our state knew my name. Nobody knew what he was about to reveal. Not even my family, especially not my family. If they had known the truth, they would never have mailed me that elegant cream-colored invitation with my name written in gold. They believed I was still the frightened 21-year-old girl they had pushed out of our home carrying 2 black trash bags filled with my clothes. They believed I had disappeared. They believed I had failed. They believed I had accepted the story they invented about me. They were wrong, every single one of them. I had spent the last 13 years working as a compliance auditor for one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the country. My job was simple on paper and exhausting in reality. I found the details everyone else ignored: tiny inconsistencies, missing signatures, one altered timestamp, one suspicious approval, one document that did not belong. People lied. Records did not. That habit had saved my career. It had also uncovered the truth about my own family, a truth hidden inside one forgotten trust document and a digital authorization log nobody had opened in over a decade. I never planned revenge. I only wanted peace. But sometimes peace begins the moment the truth walks into the room. Before I tell you how a wedding turned into the day my family lost the story they had told about me for 13 years, I have one small favor to ask. If you enjoy calm family dramas, where justice comes through patience instead of anger, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you never miss another story. And tell me in the comments where you are watching from and what time it is where you live right now. I always love reading your messages from around the world. I had barely taken my seat when the wedding coordinator walked toward me carrying a sealed ivory envelope. She leaned close enough that only I could hear her voice. Miss Mercer, this was left with strict instructions. You were only to receive it if your mother denied knowing the truth. She already has. My hands suddenly felt cold, because I recognized the signature on the back before I even broke the seal. The envelope was heavier than it looked, not because of the paper inside, because I already knew there were only 3 people in the world who still use that dark blue sealing wax with the tiny oak tree pressed into it. One was dead. One was sitting 20 feet away pretending I did not exist, and the third had just been introduced as the guest of honor. I slowly opened the envelope beneath the table. Inside was a single folded letter. No greeting, no signature at the top. Only one sentence. Do not defend yourself today. Let the document speak before you do. My heartbeat slowed instead of speeding up. That was exactly what I had trained myself to do over the years. People became emotional. Evidence remained patient. I folded the note and slipped it into my handbag, just as the master of ceremonies welcomed everyone to the reception. My mother stood first. Of course she did. She had never attended an event without becoming the center of attention. Even now, dressed in an elegant emerald gown, she looked less like the mother of the groom and more like someone accepting another lifetime achievement award. She smiled at every table. Everyone smiled back. They all knew Dr. Victoria Mercer, the brilliant cardiac surgeon, the philanthropist, the woman who donated hospital wings and appeared on magazine covers. Very few people knew the woman who had thrown her oldest daughter onto the sidewalk with 2 trash bags and locked the front door behind her. I knew both versions. The audience only knew one. My family has always believed in excellence, she began. The sentence almost made me laugh. Always. Such a simple word, such a dangerous lie. She thanked the guests. She praised my younger brother, Ethan, for becoming one of the youngest neurosurgeons in the state. She complimented the bride. She thanked friends, business partners, mentors. Then her eyes drifted across the room until they landed on me. For less than a second, barely noticeable. I am grateful, she continued, for the children who honored this family with their hard work and loyalty. Children, plural. Yet she never said my name, not once. She had perfected that skill years ago, erasing me without admitting I existed. Most people would never have noticed. I noticed. I always noticed. Compliance work had sharpened more than my eye for paperwork. It had taught me to recognize omissions. Sometimes what was missing mattered more than what appeared on the page. When the applause ended, Ethan finally looked toward my table. His expression was unreadable. Older, more tired than I remembered. For a brief second, I saw the little brother who used to sneak into my room during thunderstorms because he was afraid of lightning. Then the moment disappeared. His wife touched his arm. He smiled for the cameras. The photographer called everyone toward the dance floor. People laughed. Champagne flowed. Music filled the ballroom. My family looked perfect, just like every photograph from my childhood. Except I had been edited out of most of those. About 20 minutes later, someone gently touched my shoulder. I hoped you would come. I turned around. Judge Arthur Calloway looked older than I remembered. His hair had become completely white, but his eyes were exactly the same. Calm. Sharp. Impossible to fool. You remember me, he said quietly. I remember everyone who reads every page before signing, I answered. He smiled. So you became exactly who I thought you would. And you became exactly who my family hoped would never appear again. His smile disappeared. They still don't know. No. They truly believe you stole that money. I know. They never checked. They never wanted to. He nodded once. That tiny movement told me everything. For 13 years I had wondered whether he knew the truth. Now I had my answer. He always had. I kept copies, he whispered. Every version. I felt something inside my chest loosen for the first time in over a decade. Not relief, confirmation. I had not spent 13 years chasing a ghost. The evidence really existed. Judge Calloway looked across the ballroom toward my mother. She underestimated one thing. What? You inherited your grandfather. Before I could answer, someone interrupted us. It was the wedding coordinator. Her face had turned pale. Miss Mercer, she whispered. I'm so sorry to interrupt. What happened? She swallowed. A man just arrived asking for you. I don't know him. He says he was your grandfather's attorney. I stared at her. My grandfather's attorney died 11 years ago. She nodded nervously. I know. That's exactly what I told him. Then he showed me his identification. She handed me a business card. The name printed across the top made every hair on my arm stand up. Because it wasn't my grandfather's attorney. It was the attorney who had inherited his entire legal archive after his death. And according to the date stamped across the corner of the card, he had opened my grandfather's sealed family file. Just 3 days earlier, 13 years earlier, I would have followed that attorney without asking a single question. Not anymore. Experience had taught me something simple. The first document is rarely the important one. The second usually explains the first. The third changes everything. I looked at the business card again. The paper was thick. The edges were clean. The embossed lettering had already begun to fade from years inside a wallet. Nothing about it looked staged. Nothing looked rushed. I slipped it into my handbag. Please ask him to wait 5 minutes, I said. The coordinator nodded and hurried away. Judge Calloway watched me with quiet approval. You always slow down before making a decision, he said. My grandfather used to do the same. I smiled for the first time that evening. People assume careful means slow. Usually it means prepared. He gave a slight nod. That is exactly why your grandfather trusted you, not them. Those 3 words stayed with me. Not them. For years I had wondered whether my grandfather had truly believed the story my family created after I disappeared. Maybe he had died thinking I betrayed him. Maybe he had believed I stole from the family trust. That thought had haunted me through every birthday, every Christmas, every lonely apartment I rented while working 2 jobs to finish college. Now another possibility stood before me. Maybe he had known. Maybe he had known all along. Music filled the ballroom. Guests laughed around us. Waiters carried silver trays covered with crystal glasses. Everything looked perfect. Perfect pictures often hide damaged frames. That was another lesson compliance work had taught me. I glanced toward the head table. My mother was speaking with hospital executives. She looked relaxed, confident, completely in control. She had always been exceptional at managing appearances. Our house had been spotless, our clothes expensive, our manners perfect. Only our conversations were cold. Nothing in our home was ever free, not praise, not affection, not forgiveness. Love was another achievement, another examination, another score. If you performed well enough, you earned a smile. If you disappointed her, you disappeared. I learned that before I learned algebra. People often ask whether there was one terrible moment that destroyed our family. There was not. It happened quietly, one ordinary day after another. One comparison after another, one disappointment after another. My younger brother Ethan was brilliant. He deserved every academic award he received. None of that was his fault. The problem was never his success. The problem was that my mother believed only one child could be worthy at a time. When Ethan won a science competition, she celebrated for a week. When I finished first in accounting, she asked why I had not chosen medicine. When he entered medical school, she hosted a dinner for 50 guests. When I earned a scholarship, she forgot to mention it during Sunday lunch. I stopped expecting fairness long before I left home. My grandfather noticed. He never argued with my mother. He simply found quiet ways to remind me that I mattered. He invited me to help organize his financial records every Saturday. He taught me how every receipt told a story, how every signature carried responsibility, how people rarely lied successfully on paper. He would spread folders across his dining room table and ask me to find mistakes. Sometimes there were none. Sometimes there were tiny ones. A missing initial, a wrong date, a duplicate payment. I loved those mornings more than any holiday. He never treated me as the forgotten granddaughter. He treated me as a partner. One afternoon, he looked across the table and said something I have never forgotten. The truth does not become weaker because powerful people ignore it. It simply waits longer. I carried those words into every job I ever accepted. My mother hated those Saturdays. She called them a waste of time. She said accountants worked for doctors because they lacked ambition. Grandfather only smiled. Everyone serves the truth differently, he would answer. She never replied. She simply rolled her eyes. When I turned 21, my grandfather created a family trust. He never explained the details. He only said that every beneficiary would receive exactly what he believed was fair. 6 weeks later, everything collapsed. One accusation, one meeting, one signature I was told existed, one transfer everyone claimed I had authorized. I insisted I had never seen the document. Nobody listened, not my mother, not Ethan, not my uncles, not even my grandmother. By sunset, my clothes were packed into black trash bags. My mother placed them beside the front door. "You have embarrassed this family beyond repair," she said. I tried to speak. She raised her hand. "No more lies, Hannah. Leave." I looked at Ethan. He would not meet my eyes. That silence hurt more than every word my mother spoke. I picked up the bags, walked down the driveway, and promised myself something I never said aloud. One day I would discover why every piece of evidence pointed toward me. Because evidence never appears by magic. Someone creates it, someone benefits from it, and someone always leaves a mistake behind. I simply did not know then how many years it would take to find that mistake. I spent the next few minutes pretending to enjoy the reception, while my mind quietly assembled pieces that had remained scattered for 13 years. That was another habit my work had given me. Never force a conclusion. Collect enough facts until only one explanation remains. The attorney was waiting in a private conference room beside the ballroom. When I entered, he immediately stood. He looked to be in his early 60s. His gray suit was perfectly pressed. His briefcase showed years of careful use. Nothing about him felt theatrical. He extended his hand. "Miss Mercer, thank you for agreeing to meet me." I shook his hand. "You inherited Mr. Lawson's legal practice." I did. "He spoke highly of your grandfather. Please sit." He placed a thick brown folder on the table, but kept one hand resting on it. "Before I show you these documents, I need to ask one question. Have you signed anything your family has given you today?" "No." "Good." That answer seemed to relax him. He opened the folder with slow, deliberate movements. Inside were certified copies of legal documents. Every page carried court seals and notarized signatures. Everything had been preserved exactly as it existed 13 years ago. Mr. Lawson instructed me to release these records only if new information suggested the Mercer family dispute had never truly been resolved. 3 days ago, I received evidence that met that condition. My heartbeat remained steady. I had spent years learning not to react before understanding the facts. What evidence? A digital archive from your grandfather's estate was recovered during the transfer of an old storage server. Most of it contained accounting records. One folder was encrypted. It required 2 authorization keys. One belonged to Mr. Lawson. The second belonged to Judge Calloway. Judge Calloway authorized the release. The attorney slid the first document toward me. It was a copy of the original family trust. I had never seen it before, not once. I carefully read every page, every signature, every date, every attachment. Then I reached Schedule C. I stopped breathing for a moment. According to the trust, my grandfather had never intended to divide everything equally. He had established separate distributions based on responsibility rather than age. My mother had received the medical foundation. Ethan had received educational funding. I had been named successor trustee over several family investment properties once I reached the age of 30. Not beneficiary, trustee. The difference changed everything. My grandfather had never expected me to receive money first. He expected me to protect it. The attorney quietly watched my expression. You understand the significance. I nodded. Someone needed me removed before my 30th birthday. Exactly. He handed me another document. This one was a transaction report. Every transfer connected to the family trust during the month before I was accused. Dozens of entries. Most were ordinary. One immediately caught my attention. A large authorization had been approved at 7:42 in the evening. According to the record, it carried my digital credentials. Impossible. At that exact time, I had been attending my university graduation dinner with more than 50 classmates. Photographs, videos, restaurant receipts. Everything proved where I was. I looked up. Someone used my credentials remotely. Yes. The attorney reached into the folder again. This time, he produced something much smaller. A simple USB drive sealed inside an evidence envelope. The recovered server contained the original authorization logs, including every login, every device, every network address. Nothing had been altered. I stared at the evidence envelope. 13 years. 13 years of believing someone had erased every trace. Instead, the records had survived quietly inside an abandoned archive. My grandfather had trusted paper. Mr. Lawson had trusted storage. Neither man expected technology to outlive the lies. There is something else, the attorney said. He placed one final sheet in front of me. Unlike the others, it was only a single page. No legal language, no financial figures. Just a handwritten note. I recognized the handwriting immediately. My grandfather. If Hannah is reading this, then someone finally cared more about the truth than protecting appearances. Do not waste your life trying to make people love you after they chose convenience over honesty. Protect your name. Protect your peace. The rest will follow. I slowly folded the page, not because I was hiding my emotions, because I wanted to preserve it exactly as he had written it. The attorney closed the folder. There is one final matter. Someone requested access to these records 6 days ago. My stomach tightened. Who? He met my eyes. Your brother Ethan. He asked for the complete archive. But after reviewing the access request, I refused to release it. Why? Because he was not the person your grandfather authorized. He paused for a moment, then added the sentence that changed everything. An hour after my refusal, someone attempted to break into the archive remotely using credentials that had not been active for 13 years. Those credentials were issued under your mother's name. The attack failed. But now someone inside that ballroom knows the truth is no longer buried. I returned to the ballroom carrying nothing except my handbag. No one noticed that my entire understanding of the past had changed during the last 20 minutes. That was the strange thing about truth. It could rewrite a lifetime without changing a single face in the room. The band had started another slow song. Guests filled the dance floor. My brother and his new wife were smiling for photographers. My mother was laughing with 2 hospital board members as though nothing in the world could disturb her evening. For a brief moment, I wondered whether she already suspected the archive had survived. Then I noticed something unusual. She kept checking her phone every 30 seconds, not reading messages, waiting for one. Fear has a rhythm. I had seen it hundreds of times during internal investigations. People who believe they are safe behave naturally. People who are hiding something constantly search for reassurance. My mother had never checked her phone this often. Judge Calloway quietly joined me near one of the tall windows overlooking the lake. "You spoke with him." "I did. And everything survived. Even the login records." He closed his eyes for a second. "Thank God, you already knew. I suspected. Suspicion is not evidence. Now we finally have evidence." I looked across the ballroom again. "Did my grandfather know before he died?" Judge Calloway answered without hesitation. "Yes." My heart sank. "He knew you were innocent almost 2 years before his death. Then why did he never come for me?" "Because he was dying." The answer landed harder than I expected. During his final months, he believed Mr. Lawson had already secured everything necessary to restore your name after the legal review. He trusted the process. None of us knew the archive would disappear after the law office flooded. The backup server was placed in storage and forgotten. Until last week. I looked down at my hands. For 13 years, I had imagined 100 different explanations. None of them had been this. He never abandoned me. The proof simply vanished. Judge Calloway rested a gentle hand on my shoulder. "Your grandfather never doubted you, not for one day." I felt years of quiet guilt begin to disappear. Not all at once, but enough to breathe differently, enough to stop carrying a burden that had never belonged to me. Across the room, my brother suddenly excused himself from his table. He walked toward the terrace alone. His shoulders were tense, his smile had disappeared. I watched him step outside into the evening air. Something was wrong. Very wrong. I waited a full minute before following him. The terrace overlooked the gardens behind the hotel. The music from inside became soft and distant. Ethan stood with both hands resting on the stone railing. He did not turn around when he heard my footsteps. "I knew you would follow me," he said. I stopped several feet away. "You requested access to grandfather's archive." "Yes." "Why?" "Because I finally realized you could not have done it." The words hung between us. For the first time in 13 years, my brother had admitted what should have been obvious from the beginning. I said nothing. He continued speaking. "Do you remember the night you left? Every day." I wanted to stop Mom. I wanted to tell everyone something felt wrong. But I was 21. I believed her. She was my mother. She had documents, bank records, witnesses. Everything pointed to you. He lowered his head. I chose the easier truth, not the real one. There was genuine regret in his voice, not the kind people perform when they are caught, the quieter kind, the kind that grows for years. I asked the question that had lived inside me for more than a decade. "Did you ever try to find me?" His silence answered before he did. "No. I thought you hated us. I thought you had taken the money and disappeared because you were ashamed." I nodded slowly. That hurt, but at least it was honest. Then Ethan reached into the inside pocket of his jacket. He removed a small folded piece of paper. I found this 6 days ago inside Mom's old desk. She kept it hidden behind a false panel. He handed it to me. The paper was yellow with edge, folded 3 times. I opened it carefully. It was a printed email, dated 13 years earlier. The sender's address belonged to someone I had never heard of. The recipient was my mother. The subject line contained only 4 words. "Digital credentials updated." My breathing slowed. Every instinct I had developed as an auditor came alive, not because of what was written, because of what was attached. The email listed 1 temporary administrator account, 1 password reset, and 1 employee identification number. The identification number belonged to me. Someone had obtained my digital credentials weeks before the money disappeared, which meant one thing. The accusation against me had not been created in panic after the transfer. It had been prepared in advance. Someone had planned my fall long before I ever walked out of that house. Ethan looked as though he had not slept for days. The confident surgeon everyone admired was gone. In his place stood my younger brother, the boy who used to ask me to check his homework because he trusted me more than anyone else. I folded the email and placed it beside my grandfather's note inside my handbag. "Thank you for giving this to me." He lowered his eyes. "I should have given it to you the moment I found it." "Why did you wait?" "Because I was afraid. Afraid of Mom. Afraid of what it would mean if everything we believed was a lie." I nodded. Fear had ruled our family for years. Nobody called it fear. They called it respect. They called it loyalty. They called it protecting the family, but it had always been fear. Ethan looked toward the ballroom. "There is something else." I waited. 6 days ago, I confronted Mom. I asked her why she still kept documents about you hidden in her desk. She became furious. She told me to forget everything. Then she said something I cannot stop thinking about. What did she say? She said some sacrifices are necessary if you want one child to have the future they deserve. The words settled heavily between us. One child, not both, just one. For years I had believed my mother simply loved Ethan more. Now another possibility appeared. Maybe this had never been about love. Maybe it had always been about control. I looked back through the ballroom doors. My mother was speaking to another group of guests. Elegant, confident, untouchable, until tonight. Ethan took a slow breath. I do not think she acted alone. Neither do I. The forged credentials, the altered financial records, the fake authorization, that required planning. Someone with technical knowledge, someone with access, someone willing to destroy one person's future to protect another. I quietly replayed every document in my mind, every date, every timestamp, every name. Something suddenly bothered me, very deeply, the authorization request. It happened 6 weeks before Grandfather died. The trust had already been finalized. Removing me as trustee would only benefit someone if another document changed afterward. Trustees protect assets. Beneficiaries receive them. If I disappeared, someone had to replace me. I stopped walking. Ethan noticed immediately. "What is it? Who became trustee after I was removed?" His face slowly lost color. "I do not know, exactly. Nobody ever told us, which means nobody wanted us asking." I returned to the attorney's folder in my memory. The certified trust, Schedule C, the appointment clause. I had been reading too quickly. I remembered every word except one line. One line could change the entire case. The attorney was still inside the conference room. I excused myself and walked back through the quiet hallway. He was carefully returning documents to his briefcase. I need to see the trustee appointment page again. Without asking another question, he opened the folder. I turned directly to the section I needed. There it was, one paragraph, only 4 lines long. If the appointed trustee becomes legally disqualified before assuming responsibility, the successor shall be selected by the independent executor named herein. Independent executor. Not my mother, not Ethan, not anyone in my family. Judge Calloway. I looked up. He was never supposed to lose control of the trust. The attorney slowly nodded. Correct. Then why did he? He did not. I stared at him. What do you mean? He removed another certified document from the folder. Because according to every record we recovered, Judge Calloway never resigned, never transferred authority, never signed any removal. My pulse quickened. Then every financial decision made after Grandfather's death should have required his approval. Yes. Did he approve them? No. Silence filled the room. The implication was enormous. If Judge Calloway had remained the lawful executor, then years of transactions involving family properties might never have been properly authorized. That meant this story was no longer only about my name. It was about every decision made with the trust for 13 years. The attorney looked directly at me. Miss Mercer, there is one final document you have not seen. He carefully removed a sealed envelope. Unlike the others, this one carried fresh certification dated only 2 days earlier. The envelope contained a single court order. I unfolded it. The first sentence immediately caught my attention. Upon review of newly recovered evidence, the probate court authorizes an emergency examination of the Mercer family trust. My eyes moved lower, then lower still. Finally, they stopped on the last line. The court had already appointed a temporary forensic trustee while the investigation proceeded. I read the appointed name once. Then again, I almost believed I had misunderstood it, but I had not. The probate court had appointed me. I read the court order 3 more times. The words did not change. The probate court had chosen me because I was the last legally appointed trustee named by my grandfather. Not because I had asked. Not because I had sued anyone. Because the law followed the documents. The attorney carefully watched my reaction. "This appointment is temporary," he said. "The court expects you to preserve every asset until the investigation is complete. Can my family stop it? No. The order has already been entered. Every financial decision connected to the trust now requires your approval." For the first time since leaving home, I understood something clearly. My grandfather had not left me money. He had left me responsibility. There was a difference. Money could disappear. Responsibility remained. I closed the folder. What happens next? Tomorrow morning the court will notify every interested party, including your mother, including your brother, including every institutions holding trust assets. By tomorrow afternoon they will all know. I thanked him for everything and walked back toward the ballroom. The celebration continued exactly as before. Children laughed. Glasses clinked together. The photographer arranged another family portrait. Then I noticed something almost painful. The photographer was asking everyone from the Mercer family to gather together, everyone except me. Old habits never really disappeared. I watched from a distance. My mother adjusted Ethan's tie. She kissed the bride on the cheek. She positioned relatives exactly where she wanted them. Then she looked around. Our eyes met. For a brief second, I saw uncertainty. It vanished almost immediately. She walked toward me with the same graceful confidence she had used for decades. People nearby instinctively stepped aside. She stopped less than 2 feet away. "You are making people uncomfortable." I looked at her calmly. "Am I? You should have declined the invitation. You sent it. That was courtesy. Not forgiveness." I almost smiled. There was the familiar language. Everything sounded polished, reasonable, controlled. Only someone who had lived with her would hear the threat beneath the words. She leaned slightly closer. "Whatever fantasy brought you here ends tonight." "Our family moved on years ago," I answered quietly. "Did it?" Her expression changed almost imperceptibly. Only her eyes, only for an instant. Enough. She had realized something was different. She simply did not know what. Then another voice interrupted us. "Mrs. Mercer." Judge Calloway had approached without either of us noticing. He greeted my mother politely. "Dr. Mercer." She forced a smile. "Judge, it has been years." "Indeed." His voice remained calm. "I understand the probate court will be contacting you tomorrow morning." For the first time in my life, I watched my mother lose complete control of her face. Only for 2 seconds. But 2 seconds were enough. "What court?" The judge looked genuinely surprised. "You have not been informed." "Informed about what?" "About the reopening of the Mercer Family Trust." Silence. Real silence. Even the music seemed distant. My mother recovered quickly. There must be some mistake. Judge Calloway answered with the same steady voice. "That possibility has already been considered. The court found sufficient evidence to authorize a formal review." She laughed softly. Someone clearly misunderstood old records. Perhaps. Or perhaps old records were finally read correctly. Her hands tightened around the stem of her champagne glass. I noticed because I always noticed small things. The pressure from her fingers became stronger, too strong. The crystal gave a sharp crack. The bowl of the glass fractured. Champagne spilled across her hand and onto the marble floor. Several nearby guests turned to look. She quickly apologized to them with her usual charm. The perfect doctor had returned. But I had already seen the crack. Not in the glass, in her confidence. She excused herself and walked quickly toward the hallway leading to the private offices. Much too quickly. Judge Calloway watched her leave. "Do you think she's trying to leave?" I shook my head. "No, she is trying to make a phone call." "To whom?" I already knew the answer before I spoke. Not to someone who knows the truth. To someone who helped create the lie. At that exact moment, Ethan appeared at the entrance to the hallway. He had seen his mother rush away. He looked from me to Judge Calloway, then quietly asked one question. "Should I stop her?" I looked toward the closed hallway doors. For 13 years, I had dreamed about confronting my mother. Now I understood something my grandfather had tried to teach me long ago. Justice never needed someone to lose control. Justice only needed enough time for every document to reach the right hands. I looked back at Ethan. No, let her make the call. Because for the first time in 13 years, every conversation she had from this moment forward could become evidence. The next morning began before sunrise. My phone started vibrating at 6:12. Then again. And again. By the time I reached the kitchen, there were 17 missed calls. None from my mother, none from Ethan. Every number belonged to attorneys, banks, property managers, investment firms. The court order had already been delivered. People who had ignored my existence for 13 years suddenly needed my approval. I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was predictable. The law had accomplished overnight what years of pleading never could. It made people read. I brewed coffee and opened my laptop. Old habits. First create a timeline, then verify every fact. Never trust memory over documentation. By 7 o'clock, I had built a spreadsheet containing every recovered record, every transfer, every authorization, every signature, every property purchase, every mortgage, every distribution from the trust. A pattern appeared almost immediately, not dramatic, not obvious, elegant. The kind of fraud designed by someone who understood that small irregularities attracted less attention than large ones. The original transfer that destroyed my reputation had not been the largest transaction. It had been the first. After I disappeared, dozens of similar transfers followed. Each one approved by different people, different dates, different explanations. Yet every transfer ended inside the same network of accounts. Someone had been draining the trust for years, slowly, patiently, professionally. At 8:20, my office phone rang. The caller identified herself as the probate court clerk. Miss Mercer, the judge, has scheduled an emergency conference for tomorrow morning. Attendance is mandatory for all interested parties, including my family. Yes. The clerk hesitated. Dr. Victoria Mercer has already requested a postponement. On what grounds? She stated that the investigation would cause unnecessary emotional harm to the family. I almost smiled. For 13 years, emotional harm had not concerned her. The court denied the request. Thank you. After ending the call, I added another note to my timeline. First attempt to delay proceedings. 8:23. Everything mattered. At 9:15, another call arrived. This one surprised me. The chairman of the medical foundation introduced himself. Miss Mercer, we recently received notice that several foundation buildings are technically owned by the Mercer Family Trust. That is correct. We were unaware. So was I. There was a long silence. Then he asked the question I had expected. Will the foundation remain open? I answered honestly. If every transaction proves lawful. Yes. If not, we will follow whatever the court orders. People deserve honesty, especially when uncertainty is involved. He thanked me for my professionalism. That single sentence affected me more than I expected. Professionalism, not disappointment, not failure, not embarrassment. Professionalism, someone had finally described me without comparing me to my family. Around noon, my apartment buzzer rang. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened the door, Ethan stood there carrying 2 paper cups of coffee. He looked exhausted. May I come in? I stepped aside. He entered slowly. His eyes moved around the apartment. Simple furniture, bookshelves, a dining table covered with documents. Nothing luxurious, nothing extravagant. You built all of this yourself, he said quietly. Yes. He looked almost ashamed. Mom always told everyone you struggled after leaving. I worked very hard. I know. Another silence settled between us. He placed one envelope on the table. What is this? Old family photographs. I found them in the attic yesterday. She had hidden them. I opened the envelope. There were dozens. Birthdays, Christmas mornings, summer vacations, grandfather's garden. Then I noticed something strange. The photographs were originals, not the edited versions I remembered. I was standing in every picture, smiling, holding Ethan's hand, standing beside grandfather, looking like I belonged. My mother had not erased me from the photographs. She had ordered new copies with me removed. The originals had simply been hidden. I stared at them for a long time. Children rarely question photographs. Adults understand they can be altered. Ethan sat quietly across from me. I found the editing invoices too. Editing invoices. Professional photo restoration. Every family portrait had been deliberately changed after I left. Not because I never existed, because someone wanted history rewritten. I looked at my brother. "Why are you helping me now?" He answered without looking away. "Because I finally realized something." "What?" "If Mom could erase you from photographs, she could erase anyone." I nodded slowly. He understood. Not completely, but enough. Before leaving, he stopped at the door. "Tomorrow will be ugly. Probably. Will you be all right?" I looked at the stack of evidence covering my dining table. For 13 years, I believed I needed my family's acceptance to feel whole. Now I understood I only needed the truth. "Yes, I will." After he left, I returned to my laptop. Another notification appeared. Someone had remotely attempted to access one of the trust accounts again. The attempt failed. This time, the security system recorded more than an account number. It recorded the physical location. The login request originated from a private office inside St. Gabriel Medical Center, the hospital where my mother had served as chief of cardiology for almost 15 years. I stared at the address, then at the timestamp. The attempt had occurred only 12 minutes earlier, which meant someone inside that hospital still believed destroying digital evidence could save them. They had no idea every failed attempt was creating new evidence instead. The next day, the courthouse felt colder than the ballroom. No flowers, no music, no polished speeches, only facts. I arrived 20 minutes early carrying one leather briefcase. Inside were copies of every recovered document, every authorization log, every banking record, every certified page from the original trust. Across the hallway, I saw my mother. She wore another expensive suit, another perfect smile. Only today it reached no farther than her lips. 3 attorneys surrounded her. One noticed me first. He whispered something into her ear. She turned. For a brief second, she looked directly at my briefcase, not at me. The briefcase. She knew. She finally understood I had not come alone. I had come with evidence. Judge Calloway entered the courtroom a few minutes later. Although retired from the bench, he had been summoned as the original independent executor. The probate judge followed shortly afterward. Everyone stood. Within minutes, the hearing began. The judge spoke calmly. "This is not a criminal proceeding. Today's purpose is limited. The court will determine whether sufficient evidence exists to continue the formal investigation into the Mercer Family Trust." My mother stood immediately. "Your Honor." This matter was resolved more than a decade ago. The accusations against my daughter were fully documented. The judge looked toward her attorney. "Were they reviewed by this court?" The attorney hesitated. "No, Your Honor." "Were they reviewed by the independent executor?" "No, Your Honor." The judge made a brief note, then looked toward me. "Miss Mercer, you may proceed." I stood. For 13 years I imagined this moment. I expected anger. I expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt calm. Years of auditing had changed me. Numbers did not shout. Documents did not seek revenge. They simply existed. I walked to the evidence table. The first exhibit is the original Mercer Family Trust, recovered from the archived legal records. The second exhibit is the complete authorization log recovered from the estate server. The third exhibit is the original network authentication history. The fourth exhibit consists of certified banking records, covering the following 13 years. I handed each folder to the court clerk. The room remained silent. Then I continued. The evidence shows 3 independent facts. First, my digital credentials were compromised before the disputed transfer occurred. Second, the disputed authorization originated from a location where I could not physically have been. Third, the same pattern of unauthorized financial activity continued for 13 years after my removal. The judge slowly turned the pages. He spent nearly 10 minutes reading. Nobody interrupted him. Finally, he looked toward my mother. "Dr. Mercer, do you dispute the authenticity of these certified records?" Her attorney answered first. "We request additional time." That is not what I asked. The judge repeated the question. Do you dispute their authenticity? Another long silence. No. The word was almost impossible to hear. The judge nodded once. Very well. Then authenticity is no longer disputed. Only responsibility remains. My mother suddenly stood again. Someone manipulated those records. Miss Mercer worked in corporate compliance. She had the knowledge. I remained standing. May I respond? You may. I opened another folder. Your Honor, the recovered server automatically recorded every administrative action, including failed attempts to alter historical logs. I placed a certified report before the judge. 3 unauthorized attempts occurred last week after the archive was recovered. Each originated from St. Gabriel Medical Center, specifically from the administrative office assigned to Dr. Victoria Mercer. The courtroom became completely silent. My mother's attorney quickly leaned toward her. She whispered something urgently. Too late. The judge was already reading. Then he asked one question. Dr. Mercer, did you attempt to access the archive trust records 6 days ago? She hesitated. Only for a second. Yes, but only because I wanted to understand why this was happening. The judge nodded again. And yesterday? Another pause. No. I quietly opened one final folder. Permission to present Exhibit 12. Granted. The clerk handed the judge another certified report. This document had arrived only that morning. It contained the hospital security records, building entry logs, computer workstation identification, network authentication, and surveillance timestamps. Every record pointed to the same conclusion. At 11:43 yesterday morning, someone entered my mother's private administrative office. The workstation assigned exclusively to her account attempted to access the archive trust. The login failed. 3 minutes later, she left the office. The surveillance images matched the access records to the second. The judge looked at my mother. Dr. Mercer, would you like to revise your previous answer? She looked at the report, then at her attorneys, then at me. For the first time in my life, I saw fear replace certainty in her eyes. Not fear of losing money, fear of losing control. Because every lie she had repeated for 13 years had depended on one assumption, that the original records would never be found. She slowly sat back down, without saying another word. At that exact moment, the courtroom doors opened again. A court officer entered carrying a sealed evidence box. He walked directly to the clerk. The judge examined the attached certification, then looked toward everyone in the courtroom. It appears the investigation has just received additional evidence from the Federal Digital Evidence Laboratory. The analysis of the recovered server has been completed earlier than expected. He broke the seal, removed the report, read the first page, then his expression changed completely. He looked directly at me. Miss Mercer, this report identifies the individual who created the false authorization profile 13 years ago. The courtroom stopped breathing. Even my mother did not move. The judge slowly turned the final page, then quietly spoke the name. The judge looked at the last page for several long seconds. No one moved. No one spoke. Even the court reporter stopped typing for a moment. Finally, the judge placed the report on the bench. The forensic examination identified the creator of the false authorization profile with a confidence level exceeding 99%. Every eye in the courtroom turned toward him. He continued reading. The profile was created using a workstation assigned to St. Gabriel Medical Center. The administrator account belonged to Dr. Victoria Mercer. A quiet gasp spread across the courtroom. My mother did not react. At least not immediately. She simply stared ahead. Perfect posture, perfect expression, perfect silence. Then the judge continued. However, that account was not being operated by Dr. Mercer at the time the profile was created. I felt my heart beat slow. That single word changed everything. However, the courtroom leaned forward as one. The forensic report identified a second authenticated user, a privileged systems administrator who had physical access to the hospital network. His name appears in the security records attached to this report. The judge spoke the name. Daniel Cross. No one recognized it. No one except my mother. The color drained from her face so quickly that even her attorney noticed. Who is Daniel Cross? The judge asked. No one answered. Then Ethan slowly stood. I know him. Every head turned toward my brother. He worked in the hospital information technology department 13 years ago. He left suddenly a few months after grandfather died. The judge nodded. Do you know why he left? Ethan swallowed. Mom recommended him for a private consulting position. My mother immediately stood. That proves nothing. The judge raised a hand. Please remain seated. She sat down without another word. I quietly opened another folder. Your Honor, may I submit one additional exhibit? Proceed. I handed the clerk a thin document. Unlike the others, it contained only 2 pages. The judge examined the heading. Employment records. Yes. Daniel Cross resigned from the hospital exactly 4 days after the trust transfer. 3 weeks later, he incorporated a consulting company. Its first client was the Mercer Family Medical Foundation. The judge compared the dates. The timing was difficult to ignore. I continued. During the following 8 years, that company received consulting payments totaling more than $1.8 million. Every payment originated from accounts connected to the family trust. The courtroom fell silent again. The silence felt different, not uncertain, heavy. The judge looked directly at my mother. Dr. Mercer, did you approve these consulting agreements? She hesitated. Yes. Did your board know that Mr. Cross had previously accessed the trust records? No. Did they know he had created the authorization profile used to accuse your daughter? She looked down. No. The judge removed his glasses. Dr. Mercer, did you know? Another long pause, long enough that everyone already understood the answer. When she finally spoke, her voice sounded smaller than I had ever heard it. I knew he helped access the records. I did not know everything he had done afterward. The words echoed through the courtroom. Not because they were loud, because they destroyed 13 years of lies. She had admitted knowledge, not the entire crime, but enough. My attorney quietly touched my arm. Do not interrupt. Let her continue. The judge asked another question. Why was access necessary? My mother closed her eyes. She did not answer immediately. Then she whispered. Because Hannah would have controlled everything. The room remained completely still. Your Honor, she continued. My father trusted Hannah more than anyone. He believed she understood responsibility. He believed Ethan was too young. He believed I cared too much about reputation. He wanted Hannah to supervise every decision. I believed he was making a terrible mistake, the judge asked quietly. So you decided to change his decision? She nodded. I only wanted temporary control. I thought I could fix everything later. I never intended for it to become this. For the first time in 13 years, she looked at me instead of through me. There were tears in her eyes. Real ones. Not because she missed me, because she could no longer escape the truth. I expected anger, I expected satisfaction. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Sadness. A family had not been destroyed in one night. It had been destroyed by one decision followed by 1,000 smaller ones. One lie, then another, until no one remembered where the truth had disappeared. The judge closed the file. Dr. Mercer. The court finds sufficient evidence to continue the investigation and immediately suspends all authority previously exercised over the Mercer Family Trust. Miss Hannah Mercer will remain acting trustee until further order of the court. All disputed transactions will undergo forensic review. The courtroom slowly began to empty. Reporters waited outside. Attorneys hurried into the hallway. Everyone wanted the next story. I wanted only one thing: to go home. As I gathered my papers, someone quietly called my name. I turned. It was my mother, not the famous surgeon, not the respected philanthropist, just an aging woman standing alone without anyone speaking to her. She took one hesitant step toward me, then stopped. I spent 13 years believing I had protected this family, she said softly. Instead, I destroyed it. I looked at her for a long moment, then answered with the only words that felt honest. No. The truth did not destroy this family. It only revealed what had already been broken. The hearing ended just after noon. The reporters rushed outside before anyone else. Microphones appeared. Camera crews gathered near the courthouse steps. Everyone wanted a statement. Everyone wanted someone to blame. I quietly walked through a side exit. I had no interest in becoming tomorrow's headline. As I reached my car, someone called my name. It was Judge Calloway. He was holding a small wooden box. I almost forgot he said, "Your grandfather instructed me to give you this only after the trust returned to your care." He placed it in my hands. It was made from dark walnut, simple, elegant. The brass lock had long since lost its shine. There was no key, only a small engraved sentence, "For Hannah, when the waiting is over." I looked at him. "Did you ever open it?" "Never. It was not mine." I thanked him. He smiled warmly. "Your grandfather would be proud of the woman you became. Not because you won, because you never became like the people who hurt you." After he left, I sat inside my car for several minutes before opening the box. Inside was an old leather notebook, a fountain pen, a silver pocket watch that had belonged to my grandfather, and one sealed envelope. I recognized his handwriting immediately. I opened it carefully. The paper had yellowed with time. "My dearest Hannah, if you are reading this, then life probably became much harder than I ever wanted for you. I cannot control what others choose. I can only choose what I leave behind. I did not appoint you trustee because you were the smartest or the strongest. I appointed you because you never believed ownership meant permission to take more than your share. That quality cannot be taught. Protect people before property. Protect truth before reputation. And never spend your future trying to repair the conscience of someone who chose dishonesty. Live well instead. That will always be enough." I folded the letter slowly. For years I had imagined what I would say if I ever had the chance to speak with my grandfather again. Now I realized he had already answered every question I carried. 3 months passed. The investigation expanded far beyond the original trust. Independent forensic accountants reviewed every transaction from the previous 13 years. Several consulting agreements were declared invalid. Properties quietly returned to the trust. Money that everyone believed had disappeared was recovered from accounts nobody outside the investigation even knew existed. Daniel Cross accepted a settlement with investigators and provided a complete statement. His testimony confirmed what the documents had already shown. My mother had never asked him to steal money. She had asked him to remove me from control of the trust. He chose to go much further. Once he discovered how easy the system was to manipulate, he continued taking money for himself. Every year, every transaction, every forged approval. He believed nobody would ever review records that old. He was wrong. The medical foundation removed my mother from every leadership position while the civil proceedings continued. She did not lose everything, but she lost the one thing she had spent her entire life protecting, the image of being beyond question. Ethan resigned from the foundation board voluntarily. He later accepted a position at another hospital, smaller, far from the city. We began speaking once a week, not because forgiveness happened quickly, because rebuilding trust requires repetition, not promises. He never asked me to forget. I never asked him to keep apologizing. We simply started learning how to be brother and sister again, slowly, one honest conversation at a time. The family house was eventually sold under court supervision. I expected to feel something when I walked through it one last time. Instead, I felt nothing. The walls had never made it a home. The people inside had. And they had failed long before I carried those black trash bags down the driveway. I kept only 3 things: my grandfather's pocket watch, his notebook, and the original family photographs, the unedited ones, the versions where I still existed. Several months later, I invited Judge Calloway and the attorney who had protected the archive to dinner. Ethan came too. We ate in my apartment around the same dining table where I had once spread out evidence trying to understand the past. This time there were no legal documents, only food, conversation, laughter. Judge Calloway looked around the room. "This feels like the family your grandfather hoped you would have." I looked at the people sitting around the table. None of them had to love me because of blood. None of them needed me to earn a place. They simply chose to be there. That was the difference. For years, I believed justice meant proving my family wrong. I was mistaken. Justice was discovering that my worth had never depended on their opinion. They called me the family failure. They erased me from photographs. They erased my name from conversations. They tried to erase me from my grandfather's legacy. In the end, they erased only one thing: their own credibility. Today, I still work as a compliance auditor. Every morning, I review records that most people never notice. Every evening, I return to a life I built myself, peacefully, honestly, without asking anyone for permission to belong. If there is one lesson my story taught me, it is this: the truth does not rush. It does not argue. It does not need the loudest voice in the room. It only needs someone patient enough to keep every receipt. Because one day the documents speak, and when they finally do, no lie is powerful enough to silence them.